So, I want to talk to you a little bit here about the role of business in society. I guess a good place to start with that is what's introduced in your book with the notion of shareholders or those who own the business versus a stakeholder approach, which addresses a broader audience. Stakeholders include employees of the firm, the shareholders, but also the community in which the firm operates, its suppliers, etc. Now, Grant makes the case in the book that measuring the value to the various stakeholders is difficult and the trade-offs of views, and that ultimately the interests of stakeholders and shareholders align if we really think about the notion of profits, that to be profit maximizing, a firm needs to satisfy both shareholders and stakeholders in the longer term, and that therefore we can use profitability as the primary way we measure the performance of a firm. Okay, I think that works around some nuances, but I'll buy it as an overall approach. It still, though, doesn't address the broader social context of business, and that's worth thinking about some. The general notion when we talk about business is that the U.S. operates in a capitalistic system, but that's not really true. Virtually no economic system anywhere in the world operates as a truly capitalistic system. Every economy recognizes that businesses operate in society, and society decides how those businesses will operate. So that what we really operate in is more of a social democracy. You see a definition here that says it tries to balance between market capitalism on the one hand and state intervention on the other. That is, we put various rules in place to decide how businesses can operate and what conditions, under what rules, with what responsibilities, etc. Okay? So, I guess when I think about it, I hear all the time, oh, you can't do this or that because it's a capitalistic system and businesses ought to be free to do what they want. Well, no, that's really not the case. So the question is not whether the government can regulate the business or businesses. Really, the broader question is where and how much should we regulate business? That's a good debate to have, and there are certainly differing views. It is important to note, though, because we often hear businesses talk about where government intervention is hurting, to think a little bit about where government intervention actually helps businesses. Let me give you a quick thought exercise. So here's a question. How many companies list 1209 North Orange Street, Wilmington, Delaware as their legal business address? I'll give you some options here. All right. Little nondescript building on a street in Delaware. Well, the answer is 285,000 at last count, or somewhere around that number. It's an awful lot of businesses to operate out of one small building. And how do they do that, you might ask? Well, the reality is they don't. Over half of the Fortune 500 companies, something like 60% of all publicly traded companies, are incorporated in Delaware. Why are they incorporated in Delaware? Well, because Delaware has tax laws that are favorable to business. It has liability laws that are favorable to business. It has a variety of things that are favorable to business. So Apple, Coca-Cola, various others are all incorporated in Delaware, even though they don't really do any business in Delaware. So again, when we think about laws and regulations, we tend to think of the costs, things like taxes, the wages and benefits that we have to pay employees, pollution issues, whatever, safety regulations, etc. But we need to remember too that there are a variety of benefits. Limited liability is a big one. Tax incentives, tariffs, etc., all end up playing to the benefit of business. So, thinking some about how we balance these things is an important thing to consider. I guess we can then go beyond that a little bit and not just think of regulation, but also ask what we as a society expect of business. How should they behave? How should they operate? What responsibilities do they have, whether regulated or not? Lately, you've heard a variety of things being raised. Things like the green environment and pollution, um, various employee issues, a lot of things lately on wages and increasing minimum wages, work-life balance, whether people get time off for kids, for other issues like that. Um, Broaden out sustainability. Sometimes when we say, excuse me, I can't say it. When we say sustainability, we tend to think of the green environment sustainability, but really sustainability is a societal issue. Are we operating in such a way? Are we paying people enough they can afford to live in the places that they work? Are we producing the right goods and services? Are we doing all of the things that we need to be sustainable in the longer term? Uh, yeah. So, um, often when we talk about those kind of roles of business, we move to this notion of corporate social responsibility, usually abbreviated CSR. Traditionally, kind of the Milton Friedman view, as it's shown in your discussion board, the traditional view was that CSR was a cost that would ultimately reduce profitability, and as such, any socially responsible actions were said to go against shareholder interests. Business was supposed to do only what it legally had to, and in whatever means they could within that realm. More recently, though, there has been evidence that companies that are rated higher in CSR actually also perform better than those who are rated lower in corporate social responsibility. That is, there appears to be a positive benefit to this rather than a cost or something that would hurt profits. How this works, how this happens, there's still some debate on that. But you see a few things listed here that might. There is some evidence that it attracts customers. Some customers want to buy from socially responsible businesses. May well attract and keep better employees, the people who you can hire, partly because you may be paying higher wages, but also because they believe in that broader philosophy of the business. I've, with others, have done some research that suggests that it might be through productivity, that by hiring and retaining good employees, putting them in a good work environment, that you build a better culture, which makes you more productive and therefore increases profitability. So if that's the case, then you can make a pretty strong argument that CSR is in fact good for the shareholders, and being a responsible business will actually make you more profitable. Now, sometimes you can make a direct link between particular investments and better performance. This is kind of the route that in your book he talks about Michael Porter and Kramer building this case. However, I think you can also make a more general case for good business practices, not just addressing traditional CSR issues, but also recognizing the larger role of business in the larger society. Some of this might be reflected in the conscious capitalism movement. I put a couple of articles in the readings folder on conscious capitalism, driven by several different companies, one being the founder of Whole Foods Markets, Trader Joe's would fall into that category. Publix markets down in the southeast Florida, particularly, um, they seem to suggest that doing good, that is, running your business ethically and responsibly, pays off. Um, and I think, again, there is increasing evidence to suggest that. I think you can also take this even a little bit further. Um, I've been playing around with, and with some co authors, um, extending this notion uh, of CSR and good business practices, and arguing that they're actually very good for society. That society is better off when we operate with better business practices. Um, we've examined, or at least speculated, on the role of business in issues such as inequality, fair taxation, etc., development and sustainability, etc. Um, and again, if you're interested, I have posted another paper that I did with my father, who's a retired professor from University of California, Berkeley, called Theory X and Theory Y Economics. If you remember your organizational behavior from way back then, when Theory X was kind of a management approach that said workers are just kind of there to be used, whereas Theory Y was more of a inclusive approach. So we've tried to extend those notions not just from a managerial and employee level, but to how we view business and its role in the larger society. So, um, can you come down in a variety of different places on this question? Absolutely. Um, I have thought a lot about it, done a lot of work in the area, and I have come to some of these views you've just heard me say. But like I say, there are good, smart people out there who see it differently than I do. Uh, and I think it is a good thing to think about, especially in the times we're in right now. So, hopefully, you've already posted something to the discussion board, taking a position. But let's watch and see as everybody posts and responds, and hopefully, we can have a good discussion about this, and all of us can kind of get better enlightened as to what the various views might be.